Good evening, everyone. Tonight we have our Parents Unplugged Episode 3 podcast, where we have two parents who have come forward to share their experience, give us their voice, hopefully with the intention of advising other parents what's happening and also inspire others to speak up. So it's my pleasure tonight to introduce and thank our two parents coming on tonight. I'll introduce Jag. Jag is born in the UK to Sri Lankan immigrant parents. You grew up in Birmingham and London and moved to Ireland about 2 decades ago, just about when I moved here as well. You have 3 school-aged children, a girl who's 16 and a boys who are 11 and 14. You were married to Sinead, but she sadly passed away from cancer treatment 4 years ago. So you are raising your 3 children on your own as a single dad. And you've worked in financial services, management, consulting, and startups. And you are a practicing Catholic. And one of your reasons for speaking out tonight and raising your children with the traditional Catholic values is it was one of your dying wife's wishes that your children were raised with the innocence and the traditional Catholic values that she believes children should have. So you're very, very welcome, and thanks for speaking up tonight. It takes a lot of courage to come forward. And Kira, you're a mother to a 14-year-old girl, and your girl has just started her secondary school journey. So first year of junior cycle, is that right?
Yeah.
Excellent.
First year. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Great. So I guess I'll just open it up by asking, have your children, they've been in school first year, secondary for yours, Kira, and Jag, your children are two are in secondary, one's in primary. Have they been opted out of this content that's happening in schools that you disagree with?
Yeah, I've opted my daughter out. Yeah, there was a lot of toing and froing, but we got there eventually.
And I've opted the older ones out.
And when you say a lot of toing and... Oh, go ahead.
I've opted the older ones out. The younger one, I'm selective with what he does. I look at each session, but it invariably creeps into other things as well. So once he moves to secondary, I'll opt him out.
Okay. Great. So I'll just touch on a couple points you said there. So Kira, you said there was a bit of toing and froing and you got there in the end. What was the journey like for you opting out, for you as a parent, but also for your daughter with the toing and froing? What was the experience like? And, what's it been like, most importantly, the experience for your child?
Well, I mean, she's none the wiser, she just knows that I don't agree with what's going on in SPHE. I've spoken to her about the transgender ideology, the non-binary and all of this kind of thing. I have spoken to her. She's very innocent, so I've told her just bits and pieces that I know she can, understand. But I suppose when she brought the book home, it was the first week of September. So I was straight into the school. Probably I think it was maybe the 4th day she started in the school. And I spoke to the vice principal. And then, of course, I did my interview with Philip Dwyer. I don't know if you've seen that, Jana, but I did an interview.
I haven't seen that, but I'll be sure to watch it. Thanks.
Yeah. So we just did an interview, just basically exposing it and saying, this is happening. My child came home with this book. We're not making this up in our heads. I have the book here. So,
and what was sorry to interrupt, Kira, what was the book and what was the content in the book?
Oh God, it was SPHE, Health and Wellbeing. I can't even remember the full title of the book now, to be honest.
Okay.
But it was, there was that module in there with the transgender ideology, what non-binary is, just basically explaining it all in their school book. And I just don't agree with that at all. Life is hard enough for everybody, especially teenagers, their hormones, their bodies are changing. Why would anybody want to bring more confusion onto a child? It's absolutely crazy. And the fact that it's coming from the higher powers that be, it's just no. not my child. No.
Yeah. And when you talk to the principal, or you said you talked to the vice principal and
principal,
probably
yeah.
the teacher, when you said you didn't want your child to be exposed to the transgender ideology, what was their response to you?
Yeah, so I was kind of going, like, I was doing a bit of research for a couple of weeks. So she was in it for a while, you know, and there was nothing. They weren't learning about the transgender ideology. I was told that that was going to happen next March. So I was hemming and hawing, trying to decide, will I opt her out of that 6 weeks, or will I just pull her all together? So then, of course, you had the interview with Mary. So that riled me up even more. And then I was back onto the school again, and I emailed and I was like, I'm pulling her out of the whole program. And they said that that was fine. And then it was 2 weeks ago, I had a problem because I had told them that I didn't want her in the class, and she was put for this stand-up week. She was put watching a 2 or 3 minute video clip in school on I think it was the Monday morning, and she came home and told me. Now, it wasn't during the SPHE class, which again is what we've spoken about. You know, it's dripping into all other subjects. This was tutorial in the morning, and they were being introduced to stand-up week. So the Wednesday, I rang the vice principal again, and I was pretty blunt, I'll be honest, because I wasn't happy. You know, I said one thing and they've just gone and done this. So, you know, he tried to say that it was about bullying, and I just shot that straight down. It's not about bullying. Stand Up Week was about transgender, and it was about you know, making them feel included, you know. And like, she was able to tell me what she had seen. So,
and what did she see on that 2 to 3 minute? You said was there 1 or 2 videos?
It was just one. Yeah, it was it 2 boys? Yeah, there was 2 boys, and she said they were sitting on the couch, and then somebody came over and told them that they could be you know, they could be comfortable here, you know, that they were being included, you know, that there was no judgment, I suppose. She told me in her own words, you know. I didn't ask too much more because I was just really really I was fuming. So I rang again, and yeah, we had the call, and I just said, look, under no circumstances is she to ever see anything like that again. And I got a bit of legal advice as well on it, because I mean, they did wrong. You know, I told them face to face, I told them in an email, and I know that they seen my interview with Philip Dwyer because it went everywhere. I was very clear about my thoughts, and I just felt like he's not listening to me. I'm her mother. You know what I mean? It's my decision. I call the shots here. So the next day I went in with the opt-out letter. And then within 24
was this one from the website, our Natural Women's Council website, that opt-out letter? Yeah. Did you use that one?
No, it was actually one that I had gotten off a solicitor.
Excellent.
So
we have a few, for anyone listening, we do have a few opt-out letters we have on our naturalwomen'scouncil.ie. It's under past campaigns, but they're still valid. There's the opt-out letter 1, and then there's the opt-out letter 2 if the school gives any hassle. There's also a letter to the Board of Management reminding them of their responsibilities. But on our new campaign tab, we are asking, because like you said, Kira, that we know the books out there aren't fit for purpose. They're teaching the transgender ideology. There's books that are highly sexual. one of our letters that we have in our current campaigns on our website under schools and curriculum is we demand the immediate cessation of the whole program because it's not fit for purpose. Books that are out there aren't safe for children. They've not been risk assessed. There's no sign-off process. And the online toolkits are also quite damaging. I found for primary school, I was sent the toolkit so I could have a look. And in the junior infants class toolkit, there was transgenderism, teaching them about lesbian, bisexual, pansexual, all that stuff. Now, junior infants are just learning to read and write and make new friends. They really couldn't get their head around being boy, girl, neither or both, and transgenderism. I mean, that is not age appropriate for anyone in school, but it shouldn't be in the classroom. But for age 5, I was absolutely shocked. So I wrote to Norma Foley and the NCCA to just state the concerns and ask, who signed off on this for age 5? Of course, I didn't get a reply that anybody had signed off because it wasn't signed off and there was no risk assessment. So I'd like to turn it over. Jag, you had mentioned that your child that's in primary school isn't opted out yet. Have you? I think you mentioned you've seen some of the stuff creeping in a little bit. And if so, could you explain what you might have seen?
You get the normal letter home when they're doing RSE. And I think it's run by Accord, who are supposed to be a Catholic charity. So I look at what's on the website, I ask a few questions, and I reluctantly, kids don't like being pulled out of things, especially when they're young. They don't want to be singled out. So I have no problem with biology. Biological fact is fine. I don't mind that as long as it's age appropriate. It's the ideology that I really struggle with, and some of it's supposed to be a Catholic school and is against what we believe. The stuff that creeps in, sometimes it's very innocuous. It can be something around climate change, and they'll talk about not eating meat, or how food is. Cows are bad for you, and my wife's family would be farmers, and be horrified to hear that, and as would I. And I haven't seen it so much with him, but I have seen it in some of the other kids. There'll be a question, say, in another subject or a novel they'll read, and they'll bring out a theme that I just wouldn't be comfortable with them bringing out.
Yeah, I just want to touch on this slide I have up for everyone to see. You had mentioned, about it's a Catholic school. Your son's in primary school. Ideology doesn't have a place because it's not safe for children, but it's also for anyone listening. We covered this in a podcast a while ago. Teaching this ideology actually is in violation of the Catholic Code of Canon law. So in Catholic ethos schools, this ideology is not in line with the ethos and the characteristic spirit of the Catholic school. So, we need to be not only talking to the teachers, the principals, the board of management, but generally the priest in the area does have a part of the link into the Catholic school. This is canon law. This school's meant to be following it. Why are you breaking it? And we have written letters. Our groups have written letters to all of the bishops in Ireland as well. A couple have spoken up against this, but there is a deafening silence from many. So that is violation of the canon law. And the other thing is, in primary school, even though it's not part of the SPHE directly in the books, there is a book called Busybodies that parents let us know about last year, where it's published by the HSE. It's for 5th class primary, and it does have the gender ideology in there that, you can be a different sex than the one assigned at birth. They were saying assigned at birth as if it's not determined in the womb. And Kira, you had mentioned before coming on this call that your daughter has some learning difficulties, and we know that from looking at statistics, there was an article that came out, I think in October of last year, that said up to 95% of children who are convinced they're in the wrong body, they become gender confused, maybe on the spectrum. So did you want to kind of give any views you have on that, and how particularly it may affect your child even more so?
Yeah, well, I mean, kids who will say have additional needs, so whether it be on the spectrum, learning difficulties, sometimes they feel like they don't belong. Sometimes they feel different, you know.
Yeah.
And the way the whole transgender thing is done is, you know, well, we welcome everybody, and, you know, it's a safe space. So it would be very easy to brainwash a child with learning disabilities. My daughter, she would be like, she'd buy and sell you, but she's innocent, you know. She'd be gullible, and vulnerable. And when a teacher would say something to her, like, that's gospel to her, you know.
Yes.
So if she was
Yeah.
learning this in school, it would just be carnage. So
Yeah.
it's up to me. I'm doing my job as a parent to make sure that her head is not messed with in school or anywhere else.
Yep. Yep. And is she, if you told her, you know, there's only two sexes, boy and girl, it can't be changed, and then she went to school, whether it was a stand-up week where she was left in that classroom when she wasn't meant to be, or maybe it was an SPHE class and they also forgot to kind of sit her outside the room. Do you think if the teacher said you could be any gender, you can be boy, girl, neither or both, but she'd remember that you told her that there is only two sexes?
Yeah.
That would obviously be confusing for any child, but would you worry that she might believe the teacher and think, well, my teacher's my authority, what they're telling me is true, and she might doubt what mommy said?
Now, no, because I'm quite awake for a long time. So, I mean, when she was in primary school, I was on to her primary school about this as well. Now, it was never brought into her primary school.
Yeah.
So it wasn't an issue then. But I was prepping her over the summer, and I was like, look, there might be these things coming into school, and, you know, I don't agree with that. You know, there are only two genders, male, female. God made two genders. It's that simple, you know. So now, no, I wouldn't be worried, because she'll kind of come home and she'd be like, oh, I saw one of them flags, you know, hanging up on the notice board, and she'll kind of have a giggle about it. You know what I mean? Because I have her well educated on it, put it that way.
Oh, good. I think if
But
every
if
every parent out there had their child as well educated and, you know, with those strong roots, we probably wouldn't have such a problem and so many kids push down this path. But it's parents who trust the system blindly, who send their children to school, and that teacher acts as loco parentis. That teacher acts in the place of a parent for that school day. So people hand their children over, they run to work all day, they pick their child up, and they trust the school, and they don't always look in the school bag or, you know, ask the questions or look at the books. Now, the book that you had, Kira, that you saw the gender ideology in, was that a book that your daughter brought home, or did you have to ask to see it? Because I know a lot of parents are saying these SPHE books aren't coming home in the bags unless they request to see them.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, I think she started on a Wednesday or something, maybe Thursday, and yeah, I think she started the Wednesday. She had SPHE on the Thursday, and I just said, look, if you can bring the book home, bring it home, and she brought it home, no problem.
Yep.
So it
Oh,
wasn't
good. Okay.
Look, I said to her, you know, if your teacher takes it off, yeah, obviously that's fine. I would have just went in myself and asked for it the next day anyway. But no, she brought it home.
Yeah, because I know this year the government bought all the free the books with the taxpayer money, but the government purchased the books, and the books are staying at school unless they're brought home for homework. But with SPHE, the kids aren't getting homework, so those books are staying locked right up at school.
I wonder why.
So I wonder why. I wonder why. Everyone's thinking it's so great the government bought the books. We don't have to have any part of it. But they bought the books because maybe they don't want parents to see what's in the pages. It's also important to note that over 4,000 parents pushed back on this junior cycle material during the consultation, but the parents who pushed back, over 4,000, we were ignored. The letters were dismissed, and the books we are led to believe through conversations we've had and some freedom of information requests that the books were printed before the consultation was done. So those books were already in production even before all these thousands of parents pushed back, and they didn't destroy the books and start over. They just pushed them out there. So we know the books in the classroom are not fit for purpose. There was one book called I think it's My Wellbeing Journey. It has a red cover written by Pam O'Leary, who was on the DCU course with the whistleblower teacher. Pam O'Leary defended the content on the course. It's also written by Edel O'Brien and also Owen Cleary, who's a teacher. This book has 7 pages on detailed masturbation. You know, what animals masturbate? When do you masturbate? And there's a paired activity to talk about masturbation. So, you know, you think of a child, like, I know for a fact that my children would be very embarrassed talking about this in front of their peers. I mean, imagine your daughter going to school, being paired up and talking about masturbation with the boy who sits next to her. And I mean, it strips them of their dignity and privacy.
The mind boggles, like, it's just, and you know, it's almost, and this is the thing, it's almost so unbelievable that a lot of parents are like, no, it couldn't be, like, it actually couldn't be, but it is. You know?
Yeah. Jag, so I wanted to just turn it over to you. You had mentioned quite a bit when we were talking, you know, about the discussion we were having, that one of your concerns is the school obviously being a Catholic ethos school. If you believe you're a traditional Catholic view, it can be perceived that maybe you're an outcast, that's not progressive, you need to move sort of with the times, etc. We've heard that from different schools claiming to be more on the progressive side. What's been your sort of experience with the school, be it conversations with the teacher or the principal or even other parents at the school gate on this particular topic? What's their perception or opinions on it?
I think you're viewed as a little bit of an oddity if you're a traditional Catholic anyway. Nowadays, even little things like when my daughter's been on school trips that have been over the weekend, if I've asked, I think there was one, and it was, let's say it was to a city in Europe with lots of churches, and on the Sunday they were timetabled to go into a water park. So I would have asked, can my daughter go to mass? And then, oh, okay. It ended up they had to make a special arrangement, but that's the same with anything, including this RSC stuff, is that if you say anything, you're viewed as either a dinosaur, a bigot, or just slightly crazy. It's not acceptable to have a different view, and I think that the left in Ireland now has become very intolerant. You know, you get called far right, you get called all kinds of things. One example would be, say, my family would be very pro-life. We're involved in the pro-life movement. We go to the various events. We support charities, and all it takes is one of the teachers, and there would be some teachers who I know would have a very different view, and it comes up as a discussion. It could be over a novel, or in what's the other one called? Civics. We've called it CSP, is it? The issue, the pro-life issue, could come up, and I know if you said something that was counter to what the narrative is now, I'm sure my daughter would be looked at like a two-headed elephant. Even things like, I've heard various stories from the school, and dropping any school names, but things like there's been girls who've got in trouble because there have been children who are, I think is it furries they're called, where they think they're an animal, or some kind of animal. There's been groups of girls who have been, you know, howling and doing various things in the school. I've even heard in a school not too far from here where a litter tray was requested by a parent in the bathroom because the child thought she was a cat. I think the school drew the line at that. But there were kids who were behaving cat-like in the class, like making sounds and all kinds of things. And now, when I was at school, you would have had some kind of...
What would the teacher do, Jack? Just to stop there for a second. So we had an interview with a lady from Australia, and in that school, there's a furry community, and kids are identifying as raccoons wearing tails, and some of the children are even masturbating in the classroom, and some children have sexually assaulted other children in the playground outside the school because they're just being so highly sexualized. And I just ask, where are the teachers? You know, if I'm a teacher in front of a class of 25 children, And there's children who think they're animals and they're howling and clawing and wanting a litter box. I mean, what's the response from the teacher? That's just
I think
astonishing
teachers,
that a teacher wouldn't say, no, you're a child, not a cat.
I mean, it sounds incredulous in this day and age when you think about it, but I think the teachers have either been told or they go. I mean, if the line is a litter tray in the bathrooms, the girls' bathrooms, and everything else is okay, then the world's gone crazy. But I have heard there were some girls who said this other girl was crazy, which you might say is a bit unkind, but probably not true. And there have been suspensions because of that. I think it was in a WhatsApp group. I don't know. I didn't hear that firsthand. But if someone's being suspended for saying that somebody, what they're doing is unreasonable, you might pull them up and say you could say it more kindly. But it is crazy. I mean, that's the thing. We've got to the point now where anything goes. And if you're somebody who says, no, that's not right, you're the one now who's in the wrong. And that would not have been the case when I came to this country first, when I started visiting here in the 90s. You know, it was a very sensible country. I think now, what would my wife say if she saw what was going on? She'd be horrified. She'd probably cry at what children are exposed to, because she was a big believer that she got brought up in a very innocent island in rural Mayo, where you knew about certain. I think the way they learned about men and how babies are made was because they were on a farm. So you saw cows and you knew that. I actually remember the story. She said that one of the nuns stood up in front of the class and said, "Now, girls, you all come from a farm, so I don't need to talk about this stuff, do I?" And being girls, I said, "Oh yes, sister, please tell us." And by the end of it, it was very tame. But I think Sister Dolores, whatever she was called, was in tears because she wasn't ready to tell them basic biology. And to me, it's that, kids aren't often ready. And my eldest son, even though he's very tall and broad-shouldered, would be quite innocent. He'd be more like his mother than anything else. And he wouldn't be interested in these things. It's not that level of development yet. So I'm quite glad I withdrew him from these things very early. But I do think what's happened is that if you have traditional values now, they just look at you like you're nuts. I would know one or two of the other parents in the school, in my son's school, and we'd have similar views. We have had some successes. I mean, the school, I wouldn't say all the schools are unreasonable, but the problem is you're at the mercy of the teacher, because the curriculum is now set, and the curriculum is about as woke and mad as you can get, from what I can tell. You look at the books, the ones you read out, and I think tried to read out on the radio once. I wouldn't want my children anywhere near them. But you're at the mercy of a teacher who could have a very differing view to you. And I know I'm not saying all educate-togethers are like this, but I have heard educate-togethers, they have ceremonies saluting the pride flag, and they discuss things that I wouldn't be comfortable with children discussing. But I do know in one of the boys' school my son goes to, we did make an objection and say it's just very confusing for children. There's a pride flag flying all year round. And I think it was taken down after some parents made some complaints. So you do have a voice and you should use it, but the risk is get the wrong teacher, anything can happen.
That's a really good point, because you have a teacher like Mary Creedon, who was the whistleblower, who went on that course and spoke up and said that information is not age appropriate. It would be traumatic for a child. It was very uncomfortable for an adult. But then you have a teacher like Pam O'Leary, who was on the course, who went on public radio and said the material was fine, and she defended it. And Norma Foley wrote a letter to all principals in Ireland to say there's nothing to be concerned about in SPHE, and implied that the whistleblower was spreading misinformation. And then we produced more and more and more evidence, and I think 6 follow-up articles came up from Gript sharing the evidence. And they were trying to say that this information was for adults only and wouldn't be brought into the classroom. But luckily, the teacher, one of the teachers on the course, had her phone on record and actually recorded a teacher on the course saying she was talking about those topics in the class, that I think fisting or rimming had come up, and it's great to get dirty with students or something like that. So that once a teacher is given free rein from the curriculum, the pedagogical approach, your real lived experiences, parents are saying, well, what I see in the papers look okay, and what I see online looks okay. But what they're not understanding is, with the pedagogical approach, that the conversations and experiences and real life experiences and questions can be brought in the class. So with that case, the sky is the limit, and there are no boundaries at all. There's no limits anymore with these discussions. So, you know, parents do need to be aware. And, you know, it's hard to know how to, if you're at the school gate and you assume that not everyone's on social media, not everyone has seen our podcast, our Twitter post or anything, they're not on social media, other than a leaflet, the only way that that parent can be aware of what's happening is for parents like us to have those conversations at the school gate. I'd like to ask if either one of you have, I suppose, had a conversation with a parent who wasn't aware. Have you ever had a conversation with them to educate them? What did you tell them? What was their response?
There is another parent whose child is also in Hannah's class. So she wasn't fully aware, but I brought her up to speed. So I'm not sure what she's going to do. Obviously that's her decision. But other parents, you see, my daughter, she started, it was a brand new school, so I actually don't know a lot of the kids or the parents in there. But I mean, my own friends will say they would say they've learned quite a lot from me speaking out. I suppose it's a case, I'd be quite vocal on my social media, so on my Facebook and my Instagram, about a variety of topics that are going on in the country at the moment. And you know, my posts, they're not for everybody, Jana, you know yourself. But I am getting through to people, yeah.
Oh, that's good.
But again, I think a lot of people are just, it's just that thing, isn't it, where it's fear. It's like, oh, I don't want to rock the boat there, you know, but it's your child. It shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
It shouldn't matter. Like,
what I found is when I'm having conversations with people, you know, at first there's disbelief. It's this can't be true. This can't be in the books. And I did at one point go around with a rucksack filled with school books. So if I was in the barber shop with my son getting a haircut or the grocery store and I had this small chat with someone, did you see what's in the school books? No. Did you realize they're teaching children they can be a boy, girl, neither, or both? And they have this look of shock on their face. I said, actually, let me just pull out a book. And I'd have a book in front of me. And look at the genderbread person. You can be a boy, girl, neither, or both. It's teaching your children to be non-binary, transgender, pansexual, this cross-dressing in one of the toolkits. And then once they see it for themselves, the look of disbelief turns to shock and then a little bit of anger. And then it's, I'm going to talk to the teacher. So it's how can we, and Jag, I don't know if you've talked to any parents at your school who maybe didn't know, and how did you approach it and what was their reaction? Because I think the reason why I want this conversation for people to hear it is how can we get the, 80% of the parents who might not know what's going on because they're too busy, how can we let them know what's happening and do it in a way where, they'll be receptive? So have you had any experience, Jag, with that?
Yeah, some. I think most parents are in the blissfully ignorant. They just don't look at this. They just trust the school because they always have. And I think what's happened as well, if you look at Norma Foley, when she's asked these questions, she'll just outright deny it. And, she'll deny that she'll say the books aren't used or, what parents don't seem to get is this is in the curriculum. You can go online, you can look at it. It's there in black and white. These people are telling you what they want your children to learn, whilst they say another thing in public. And you're really down to the teacher having some, cop on to say this isn't suitable. And there's always going to be a line that's crossed because, so for me, you're better off just taking the kids out. And I think a lot of people are just very nervous about being singled out. But the more people that do it and the more you tell people. So when I would be very open and say, look, I don't think kids should be exposed to this. There's a way, there's letters. I've given the links to the ones you have on your the Natural Women's Council site. And you can take the child out. I know and we were told at first that if we took my son out, we'd have to pick him up from the school and take him out of the school and drop him back. And that wouldn't have just been feasible because, for an hour, I would have had to try. But if you withdraw from religious education, you don't have to do that. There'd be Muslims and other denominations who wouldn't be sitting through the religious education class in the Catholic schools, but they don't have to be picked up. Whereas we're told that, but it didn't turn out to be the case in the end.
Yep. That's great. So yeah, it's making those, this big talk of there's this horrible thing happening in school, but how do you bring it into the small talks at the coffee mornings or the school gate? And here's a page just from one of the books that I was carrying around for a while. There's a confused looking androgynous child. I don't know if it's a boy or girl, but this is teaching age 12.
That's the book that my daughter had.
Cisgender, transgender, and it has the little genderbread person. It talks about being pansexual, coming out. And then we have, again, the genderbread person here. Gender identity is how you see and feel about yourself as male, female, both, or neither, irrespective of the sex you were assigned at birth. And that's the cover of that book there. So, it's also blurring reality for a child, because if you think about it, my kids are 6 and 9. And if a child is walking down the street, let's say they're at the shopping center or walking down the street, when they see people coming at them, what's the first thing they know about that person walking? If it's a male or a female, your child, even as an infant, they can say boy, girl, man, woman. If you blur that reality for a child, you start to make them question everything. If they're taught to question whether someone's a man or woman, which they learn from age, 1 or 2, everything in their life becomes unstable and they don't know reality and fact from fiction. So it really could be detrimental to, a young child's mind. And I suppose, is there any other experience, Jag, before we wrap up, anything else that you'd like sort of to get on the table and talk about, have other parents here?
I think the whole thing is quite simple. I think childhood is a beautiful, innocent time. It's a time where, children have worries and they worry about things. And as they go through teenage years, the worries change and amplify. But essentially, when a baby's very young, they're very attached to their mother. They know their mother's a mother, a woman. They know their father is a father and is there for a different role to their mother. And my children would have had a fairly rocky ride with everything that's happened. I mean, my youngest son was 4 when Sinead got sick and went into hospital, and he would have been a real Mammy's boy. And but having said that, they had the stability of those things, and my wife was always very good at. She knew what was appropriate and not for them. She had a very natural protective sense, and I'd always back her up. And I try and carry that on now that she's not here. And I think with a child, they need that stability. If you start questioning things like a man, kids are confused at the best of times. They don't know. They believe in dragons and whatever and fairy tales, because that's a beautiful thing. They've got very active imaginations. If you tell them a boy can become a girl, and I'm not saying this out of say, for example, different sexualities, and I know they exist, and we can, the rights and wrongs are for a different time, but I do know quite a lot of my daughter's friends who would have gone through, and I'm sure this happens anyway, but they've gone through phases where they weren't sure of their sexuality, but it seems far more prevalent now and much younger. When I was a child, this didn't happen until much older. Of course, you liked girls and girls liked boys, and you had crushes and all sorts of things, and crushes on teachers, and things that have happened for time immemorial. But you didn't really have this strong. I don't remember many people saying, "I think I'm a lesbian. I think I'm gay. I think I'm this," and there was nobody. I don't remember anybody saying a boy who thought they were a girl. There were effeminate boys, and some of them, a very small number, turned out to be gay. Some of them were just effeminate boys, and they got married and had children and normal things. And they were also masculine girls. Often they grew out of that. Whereas now they've been bombarded with this whole, and I think that's what it's for. I think underneath it all, whatever you might believe in conspiracy theories, there's a reason to destabilize the family. And if you destabilize your sex, I don't know, you want to use the word gender because it's very conflicted now. If you get someone to question something as simple as that, it's in Genesis, male and female, he made them. If they question those things, everything falls apart. and then
That's right. That's a basic fact of life is there's a male and there's a female. And years ago, I mean, we started campaigning on this particular topic just over 2 years ago, but 3 or 4 years ago, I didn't even really know about transgenderism or that, kids were being pushed down this path. I didn't even know several years ago about puberty blockers. And now you look at what they're pushing onto kids in school. It's causing rapid onset gender dysphoria, and it's very prevalent amongst girls. And if we look at the age that's targeted first in the Irish school system, it's very sinister because it's the first year they're in secondary school. So it's new kids around new friends, parents around strange parents at the school gate they don't know. It's children who were going through puberty. It's the age 12 to 15. So they were very selective, pushing the transgenderism and this highly sexual and indoctrinating content for age 12 to 15. They're pubescent. They're in a new school. They're rebellious and they have hormones. So that's like a perfect storm waiting to happen if you pushed it on that particular age group. But you made a really good point, is that childhood is, I mean, the innocence is so beautiful. Children believe in, fairies when they're walking in the forest, and magic, and, Santa Claus at Christmas, and all these like magical things. But childhood is such a short time. I look at my daughter who's 9. She's halfway through primary school. In just a few years, she will be a teenager out with her friends, and all that magic and innocence will be gone because they're not going to believe in fairies and making a wish on a shooting star and all those beautiful things. So I just can't understand why they would want to destroy in the schools childhood, which is so beautiful, so innocent, so short, but we only get one chance to get it right. If we destroy that childhood when they're young, you don't have a chance again to fix that child's innocence. Once they destroy the innocence, it is gone.
And it changes everything forever. I think the way you see the world, and you can meet. My wife would have come from a very traditional West of Ireland Catholic background, and she would still have had that innocence, as an adult. And it was a beautiful thing to see. I don't remember her. She had a wonderful sense of humor. I don't remember her making a smutty joke or anything like that. She just didn't need to. She could find very innocent things funny. But I think there's something deeper behind it all. Even if you strip away all of the woke stuff about the transgender, the LGB, queer theory, whatever it is, even things like forming families and marriages and people, men and women pair bonding. There's lots of research to show that, if you encourage things like promiscuity, it's very hard especially for girls, for women to pair bond, but also for men. And one thing I notice now is that there's this big push to get women out into the workforce and to have a career, and that's fine. That's if that's what you want. But there's no talk about. The nuns would have spoken to the girls back in the day and said, "Isn't it wonderful to be a mother?" I've never heard that mentioned. And I would say that my daughter's very bright. She could have a very good career. She's also very creative. She loves making clothes and all those sort of things. But I would always say to her, one of the biggest joys, and I learned it a bit later in life, is having children. And I remember my wife, after we'd had a third child, said, "Well, if you ever wanted to go back to work or study, we could do that." And then she turned around to me and said, "Actually, I really enjoyed being a wife and a mother." And she used to write it on the census form. And she also said that it's not recognized enough in a country where that was one of the pivotal roles in a household. It was the Mammy. And now it seems to be discouraged. So I think it goes deeper than all of that. They don't seem to want to encourage families to form and women to marry and have children.
That's right. And one of the we covered in one of our podcasts in the playlist on our YouTube channel, and you can find it on naturalwomenscouncil.ie for anyone listening, is we did a 6-part series, The Corruption of Irish Education, and it talked about exactly that. It's Marxism tactics. It's the break down the family, destabilize the family, and the government will have more control over the children. So if we look at what's happening in schools here in Ireland, the books were purchased. They now feed the children the government hot lunches, and the ingredients are definitely a concern. I've had samples at my house. I did a podcast on that. The government wants to give children medicine at school, injections at school, flu mist at school. So the government is stepping in, and then they want the mom and dad to both go out and work. They want the children to go to creche at a very young age and have the state, they're looking at having the state pay for creche. The government wants to raise people's children, and parents need to start to take ownership back of their children. You know, the child is with the parents. The parents are the family and the parent, not the state. And there's a big overreach right now with the state here in Ireland. And I know from speaking with people in Wales and England and US and Canada and Australia, it's exactly the same across all of those countries. This is not Ireland specific. It's breaking down the family and the traditional values. I mean, we saw recently that anti-Irish book ridiculing, mocking, and undermining the traditional Irish family. And that book, that went viral here in Ireland, and they retracted that book. But for every book that they've retracted, there's a dozen out there that are equally as bad or worse to indoctrinate the children. And the other thing is, in the books you mentioned as well about the family unit and, the wife and mother, nowhere in the books do they mention marriage. They talk about this highly sexual content, but they're not talking about sex in the context of being in a loving marriage, a relationship with respect. It's highly sexual, but marriage is not mentioned. Sex for procreation is not mentioned. It's just a free for all. Go out and have sex as long as there's consent, and then teaching it from a very highly pleasurable perspective. Children are getting sexualized far too young. We had one mom who came to us and said her child went home at age 9 and said, I think I'm a lesbian, and wanted to kiss girls at age 9. And, it's getting younger and younger. So we are, the state is trying to overreach, raise the children, step in and break down that innocence. And it's only parents speaking up that will stop it. So, Jag, I'd like to thank you for the conversation tonight. I know we're coming to the top of the hour. We want to try to keep it under an hour. So people can take time to watch this. But you've had some really good points, and I think that I would ask all of our listeners to have those small chats. Whether it's at the food shop in the queue, the barber shop, the on the sports pitch on a Saturday morning. All it takes is, have you seen what's in the books? What do you think? And usually you sort of get a blank stare. I have no idea. I haven't seen the books. And when you talk about what's in the books, not many parents want it. Once they actually take an interest, and once they actually look at what's in their children's school books, most responsible, logical parents do not want this in their children's classroom. But only through thousands of parents speaking up, it will be stopped. So hopefully through discussions tonight, hearing you and Kira had to drop off to get her child to bed tonight. But the discussion with you two will hopefully inspire a few more parents to speak up, and a few more. And before you know it, people are starting to talk about this and not worry about being labeled or othered and having that fear, because what we should fear most is childhood being destroyed. That's the biggest fear right now. Don't worry about what other people think if you have these conversations.
I say especially to fathers, because often as a father you can feel like it's not your realm. You often go to the school. I didn't anyway. And I think men probably tend to have a bit more of a step back and let the mothers do that. And I would have done the same until I couldn't. And I think talk to other men. Don't be afraid of speaking up, and just don't be afraid. I do think we're in the middle of a Marxist takeover. I mean, Mao would be blushing at some of the things that are going on, and we do have to speak up. So speak. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of being othered, because they can't other everybody.
So that's a great place to end. And thank you, Jag, for raising that, to speak up without fear. Don't worry about being othered or labeled. What's most important is protecting our children and being sure that they get a good education free from indoctrination. Thanks, everyone, for listening.